we have pulled back the curtain so far on how AI technologies work and how fast the pace of technology has gone in that realm. You've used some of these technologies in your personal and your professional lives. We've also stopped and we've talked about the ethics of these technologies at a larger scale. But we've forgotten a very important group of stakeholders in terms of use of this technology, and that is our students. So this week, we're going to zoom in on what using AI with students looks like. And I want you to keep in mind some of these questions as we delve into the topic of plagiarism and cheating. I want you to ask yourself, where do you draw the line? I'm going to show you in a bit a continuum of how students may be coached to use this technology. And I want you to keep these questions in mind because these are going to be your discussion post questions for this week. The first question is, which of these would you consider cheating? We're going to give you examples, and I want you to understand where you draw your own moral, personal line. Question number 2 is, which of these steps is relevant to our students' future? And question number 3 is, which of these would you use in your work as an adult, as a professional? So see if these lines are the same or if they differ depending on the context that we're talking about. So for humans, in education, we're used to talking about Bloom's taxonomy, and we know that it goes in order, starting with lower order skills of remembering and understanding, all the way up to those higher order skills of evaluating and creating. But it's funny that AI doesn't work in the same linear sequence. There are some things, like remembering and analyzing, that AI is incredible at. And there are also things like understanding and evaluating that it's still working towards. And humans have, that advantage still in many of these areas of cognitive thought, but it's nonlinear. So when we talk about academic integrity, or we talk about using technology as a tool, there are some things in the continuum that humans are still best at, and there are some things that AI just crush it in a great way in assisting with. So keep this in mind as we talk about these different areas this week. So I want you to think of those 3 questions as we go through this continuum of AI use with students in the classroom. And I want you to think what's cheating and what's okay. So I'm going to give you these step by step, and I want you to take note of when you flip from understanding. And as we go up, more AI will be involved in the creation, but we're going to start on a side that's very human. So we can all agree that this first one, student does all the work without any assistance from AI or the internet. This isn't cheating. But let's be honest, when we also ask students to do work without any assistance from technology, we have a few issues that still arise. One, we probably aren't preparing them in any relevant way to live in the real world or the future. Another one is some are probably going to use the internet or AI even if we tell them they can't. And we may need to check our own motivations for asking them to do this kind of work. So this could be rooted in our own misperceptions of what will truly help students thrive in this world. But for many things in schools, we still work from our brains only. And if our reasoning for this kind of work is, I want to know what's in their head, or I want to know what they can do on their own, we still may be a little bit disconnected from the real world, because it's extremely rare that real world demands that we do something without the support of the internet or AI or other people. But we still may want them to do that work in a silo, disconnected from other people or their information, as a source of things that are lower on that Bloom's taxonomy, such as recall. So what do students have to do for transparency when they do this type of work? Not really anything. There's no way a student can transparently prove that they weren't supported in individual work personally. So this is the type of work that I think is people's gut reaction to new technologies is, I'll just get them to do it on paper. And that's right, it still works. So let's talk about the second option. And this is really the bare minimum, right? Spell check, autocorrect, Grammarly. They all use AI and some technologies to improve our writing. And they're that first line of defense that we ask students to employ every time they turn something in. especially older students, even if they aren't using large language models, they at least use the Google Doc, squiggly line, spell check, and grammar checker. So this is where students write all content, but they ask AI for feedback to improve. So this is that bare minimum line. Lots of writers use AI tools already to improve individual passages or paragraphs. And AI models can take best practices in writing and align them with that. So the big questions students and teachers should ask are these suggestions in line with what students have been taught in class? Because there are lots of different ways to write and different ways to interpret the world. And one AI model suggests it may not line up with what students have been taught by a teacher. So what do students have to do for transparency in the second step? Well, we don't really ask students to disclose if they used a spell check or a grammar check or an autocorrect. So unless you want to have a conversation about the process of creating, students really don't have to disclose that they've used any of these types of technologies. So, third one up, student consults the internet or AI for ideas, but creates their content on their own. When I think of things that I go to, this is my surface level looking, right? It's like going to Pinterest for home decorating ideas. It's like looking up recipes online. It's like mimicking your favorite YouTuber in a video, or your favorite singer or artist or author. Referencing the internet for ideas is something that we do every day because ideas are everywhere. And it's up to humans to capitalize on this. So there are some real-world lessons to be learned about citing your sources and when to do it. But then again, there are also real-world implications to understanding when it isn't necessary. So, you see this in music a lot. Blues artists don't always preface every song by saying, I love the blues because of B.B. King, so he gets this credit for inspiring me to even start down this path of, no, that doesn't happen for every song in every genre and everything inside the topic of music, and it doesn't happen otherwise. Sometimes we are inspired by things or ideas as a starting point. So an important question in this process is there a benefit to limiting the student to only seeking inspiration? Especially when we're talking about AI. So if you're having a hard time generating ideas, the answer here might be yes. And there might be some reasons to use that technology. But as long as it's benefiting the student and preparing them for a world where AI is present. Student transparency here. Students might not need to cite AI if it was only used for idea generation or inspiration. So teachers might ask students to supply a transcript of what they generated using AI so that they can discuss it as the writing process or creation process goes on. But this is looking for outside sources for ideas. Remember, think of those 3 questions. What are you okay with so far? The next one says students gathers stats or research via AI, but they create the content all of their own. So this is beyond looking for starting points or ideas. And in a way, this is the real world work of a researcher, right? When I'm asked to learn about a new topic as an adult, I gather information, I analyze it, I figure out what's important, then I find this coherent, clear way of communicating findings to the benefit of the people who are going to read. So if AI helps teachers write lesson plans, then that's kind of doing this part of it, right? And it's us who's responsible for that final product. But AI might have assisted in getting there. And there's a big caveat here, which is accuracy, because we still know that there are, sites of using AI that have been notorious for inaccurate information or statistics or claims. So there's still an element of fact checking that is crucial in here. But that's always been crucial. If you think about the mantra of journalism, even if your mother says it, check it out, right? So maybe these accuracies or inaccuracies with AI will help us focus on verifying information and information literacy more than ever. But you also might not consider AI a primary source in the first place. We don't often still, to this day, let students count Wikipedia or Google as sources of information. They're ways to find sources. So they're summaries of what a source says. So an AI tool like ChatGPT isn't the actual source, but it can be helpful for understanding and improving the baseline of our work, but it isn't an actual source in some aspects. So what should students be transparent about at this level? Well, they could provide a transcript of the research they collected with AI, but it probably is more precise for the student to create a bibliography of the sources that the AI model draws from instead. So remember, you're asking yourself, where do you draw the line? All right, student writes a draft of something, and AI writes a draft of something, and student figures out and edits and adds the best AI ideas into their own creation, right? We're getting more and more gray as we go up this chart, and all of the responsibility of creation has been laid on the shoulders of the student at this point, right? In this example, AI serves as a point of comparison after they had created an initial something, and one that can help refine and edit the student's work. So people do that professional authors do this during the writing process, right? They have tried to incorporate drafts and versions of drafts that have drawn on either human editors or technological editors to read each other's work until it crosses that finish line to completion. But this classroom example really lets the students improve their work with the AI draft, and that's a skill that is relevant and responsible in today's world and future. So how should students be transparent about using technology in this level? Well, that might depend on how much the student's work is influenced by the AI draft. So if the student makes just a minor change or two, then they might not need to cite the influence AI had on their work at all. But if they make major changes, right, and I think it would be reasonable to ask the student to reflect on the changes and why they made them and why they were beneficial to the draft. So the AI draft is part of the assignment. The student could even turn it in with the student-created work, and the teacher would have that as reference as well. All right, student creates content until they get stuck. Then they ask AI for help to get unstuck. If this example may be the most vague on this list, because getting stuck is vague, right? We all know that there are varying levels of being stuck. Even when I work, there are times where my mind is tired and I need a break. But I don't know if I would call that stuck. I just am tired and I need a break. But there are also times where I really don't know where to go next. And both of them feel stuck, but this level of persistence or, grit will get me through mental fatigue usually. But those bigger problems, like sometimes often need to phone a friend. So if students understand the importance of grit or tenacity or persistence, and you feel that your students will follow through accordingly, then maybe this is an option that's viable to them. But it's definitely a good example of how AI can support and assist human intellect in this strangely symbiotic way. But how should students be transparent in this level? And that really depends on teacher preference and how heavily the AI coaches the student. So students could disclose how much the AI coached them and even provide a transcript again of the interactions with that AI model. Or the student could claim that they wrote it themselves, which becomes a problem, right? As we go up this. So the next one is AI guides through students through a writing process, such as a writing coach. And it says writing here, but we know the act of creation involves lots of different steps. So this isn't something that's held to an ELA block or a reading or a writing block, but it's true for any subject that they would be developing thoughts and putting them on paper or creating something from it. And this example is kind of a big shift. This is the one where the pendulum kind of swings from, mostly written by a human to kind of mostly written by an AI. So there's lots of teachers who will sort of rush to the previous steps in this point. But if you rush too quickly and you neglect the importance of scaffolding skills, students will feel stuck and unable to do this work. So this step is based on having a tool that can serve as a writing coach. And more large language models, especially in the last couple months, have allowed the creation and development of coaches in lots of different topics with this natural language processing as it's gotten better and better, especially in the K-12 space. And some of those models will soon be training and best practices for writing and communicating clear thought. So Khan Academy kind of already has a version of that with Khanmigo. And then other AI models like ChatGPT, Bard, and Bing, they do this to some extent as well if they're prompted carefully or if you create custom chats. So in this example, instead of doing thinking and writing work for them, AI guides students through the writing process. So it prompts them to brainstorm ideas, and then it asks them to prioritize the ideas that they brainstorm. It asks them to list out reasons why they're important, to create an introduction, to provide context, all of those things. But it does so in a very scaffolded way where it helps along in the creation process. So where should students be on transparency level in this? Well, that kind of depends on teacher preference again, and how heavily the AI coaches the students. So, a student could disclose how much the AI coached them on a percentage scale or how often, and maybe relate that to how teachers coach them. But they could also, again, provide a transcript of the interactions with the AI model. Or the student could claim that they wrote it themselves. Once again, it's a thing that's going to come up as we're talking about this topic. So in the real world, at some point, even responsible adults don't cite all of the supports that they used. And, a professional wouldn't submit a resume with a disclaimer created with the aid of a career coach, right? They're not going to put that on a resume. And people may not put that on presentations and that kind of stuff either. So you have to ask yourself, where's the line? And we're kind of getting in the middle of this on this list. Student writes bullet points to include, but AI writes the draft. So want to prepare students for the real world, and a real world that definitely includes future AI. I think that we have to seriously consider versions of this example. Why? Because this is an option that lots and lots of adults really, 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 really like in the professional world. Adults have developed this thinking and writing skills, and they can skip to this step. But students often still need to develop these skills. So there's something to that, but we also maybe won't want to force students to only do work that's inauthentic to that is what is expected in the real world and commonly used there as well. So there's this balance, especially with older students. So how do we further boost skills through an assignment like this? Well, you could encourage them to create better and better and better lists of bullet points, and to test them out to see if those improved bullet points gets better drafts when it's written by AI. But at this point, the AI is doing most of the heavy lifting. You're coming up with your synthesized information and what you think is valuable, but the student isn't writing it at this point. So you can encourage students to improve on the draft created by AI, and you can have them adjust it for clarity or for tone or voice or appropriateness for audience, but the AI is doing the writing. So students' transparency level, they probably should disclose that the draft was created by AI, right? Along with the guidance of what ideas or points they put into it. Maybe that bulleted list of ideas, and that it was an AI draft, and even summaries of the changes made by and to the AI draft. So remember what questions we asked at the beginning. Where do you feel cheating is on this continuum? What do you expect for adult people in the field of professionals, including education, so far? The next one is AI generates multiple drafts, and student chooses the best parts of AI drafts. So if you think about our Bloom's pyramid that we started with at the very beginning, students are doing some higher level thinking with this part, but they didn't do the creation necessary before. So they're kind of jumping ahead in steps. So in previous examples, they count on AI to decide on the final ideas and the writing in the assignment, but here students are picking and choosing the best parts of several AI generated drafts. So if this was an assignment, it increases the complexity of decision making, right? Students make choices about the best content to include, but they also have to remember the writing format they're using and stick to the appropriate format. So an example is, it probably wouldn't make sense to include 3 fully developed conclusion paragraphs. A better choice might be stick to 1, or to write one that logically takes all the points from the 3 conclusions into account, right? So they still have to understand good writing in order to successfully generate drafts of editing. So transparency for students in this level is that they probably should disclose that most of the writing is being done with AI, but organization and choices are done by them, the student. Providing the AI generated drafts along with the final product would help preserve academic integrity in this area. We're getting close to the top, which you're feeling is becoming more and more AI generated. So this one is student rewrites AI generated content with their own improved ideas. So this gives students a heavier hand in the writing and sharing and creative process. But instead of making small adjustments, the student develops their own writing voice. So they take more ownership of the final message instead of just accepting what the AI tool creates. Again, this is this gradual release of responsibility in creation of work, right? These are kind of empowering steps for emerging writers, or writers at least, and students that feel paralyzed to try and create from scratch, or that blank screen with a blinking cursor feel. But it also could be empowering for students learning English as a new language. Transparency for students at this step is that they probably should disclose that most of the writing is still being done by AI. And this probably only works if students provides the original AI creation and they, highlight the changes that they made to it and why. Almost to the top, AI writes content, but student edits it based on what they learned in class. And there's actually some student demonstration of skills and understanding here, right? Students are making surface level changes to the AI, writing and leaving big ideas in place. So they're synthesizing information that they learned, and they're hoping to incorporate it into the task that they're having AI do. So if the goal of your assignment is for students to create a coherent, well-organized thing from start to finish with clear communication, this assignment's probably going to miss lots of those steps. But if you want to talk about the process of creating, this could probably work. You want to evaluate the writing of the tool, it could work. This is more about looking at the work writers and creators and thinkers do than actually doing the work. And that can be really beneficial in many situations. I remember an example from this year with a classroom that was doing podcasts. And if many students didn't have a lot of background knowledge of podcasts, they were looking for certain archetypes after listening to lots of different podcasts. So there were variations in how professionals did it. So, they were more focused on this aspect of finding the patterns in the work than actually doing the work at this point in the game. Student transparency at this level, though, they should absolutely disclose that most of the writing is being done by AI. And this, once again, probably only works if students provides that original creation, and then instead of highlighting what AI created, you highlight the changes that you made as a student and why you made those changes. And then we made it to the very top. AI does all of the student work for them with no thought by the student. And let's just say it, this isn't what we want, right? This would probably absolutely be considered cheating or plagiarism. If a student uses AI like this to do classroom or classwork, there are deeper issues at play. Is the student able to do the work? I don't know. Does the student feel confident enough to start? Does the student have motivation and reason to do the work? All of those things would be questions if you had students using AI in this manner. Also, this isn't the only way generative AI tools like, ChatGPT are being used by students. It isn't the only vision for generative AI in learning, but students might not know what a responsible vision looks like unless you've worked through some of those other previous steps. Student transparency at this level, there really is none. The student is passing off AI work as their own, right? We can tell by these extremes. Those are very black and white. Student doesn't use any AI or technology. Student uses only AI and technology. But in between, we have all of these different layers. And I promise you, if I could have fit more things on a screen, there's probably layers and layers and layers in between this as well. So I want you to think back to those questions that I asked you. Which of these would you consider cheating, right? Where on this continuum would you consider cheating to lie? Where is the first step that you would consider that? Number 2, which of these is relevant to our students' future? These are lots of different uses. And the balance between human and AI is very, very gray in the middle there. which one of those would you feel comfortable saying is an important skill for students to have for future careers? And finally, which of these would you use in your own professional life as an adult? Where would you draw your own line for professional use on this list from human to AI? So I am very interested in hearing your opinion on this, because although we've used these technologies in our professional lives, we've probably run into some of these gray areas. And I know we've talked ethics, and I know we've talked the technology behind it, but now we're talking about the people in our field of education that matter most, our students. And what is that future going to look like for them as they encounter this technology more and more and more places, as it makes it into the zeitgeist at an alarmingly fast rate? We have to keep asking ourselves, where is that line, and how can I coach students on that line so that they understand the expectation of learning in our modern K-12 settings?